All right, fire away.
What did you think of yesterday's championship game? You get to watch that?
I did. I wasn't gonna, but I watched it. Um, what did I think? I think it's two really good teams. Don't you think? Right? I mean, watching them throughout the year, but then in a game that, in a game for the bid to go to the dance, both teams, they play dang good. So I think both those teams are good enough to play in the NCAA tournament, and Indiana State, hopefully that plays out the way it should, because both those teams are good enough to be in the NCAA tournament.
And I asked the first question to ask this one about Indiana State. Their net ranking is 29.
Yep.
I mean, the term I would use is criminal if they don't get in. What would you say?
Yeah, I mean it's. I don't know what the lowest. I think there's one in the 30s. The net's been in for just a couple of years now, and I think somebody was in the 30s. I thought I read it the other day.
Missouri State one years ago.
Yeah, that's where I was going to go next. You go back to the RPI when Barry Hinson was coaching Missouri State, and it was a bad one.
Yeah.
Right? They should have been in the NCAA tournament. We already had 4 teams in that year, and Missouri State got left out with again, we'll have to check the math, but I believe it was 21, and I believe it was the lowest RPI to ever not make the NCAA tournament. But at that time, we have 10 teams in our league. We already had 4 that were in. So, and I don't have their resume memorized, so not able to say, hey, they didn't have this win or they didn't have a huge non-con. Like, I don't have all that, but I know it was 21. So one of the things that's going to come up is Indiana State, I believe, is now I think they were 1-3 going in yesterday. They're 1-4 now in the quad 1, right? So they're going to say, okay, same thing. It's the same thing that happens every year. They're 1-4 in quad 1, and you're going to have a team in one of the Power 5 leagues or the Big East that is 4-9 against quad 1. So they've got 3 more quad 1 wins, but they've got 5 or 6 more losses. That'll be again conversation. Auburn is 1-7 against quad 1 teams, and they're going to get a 5 seed. Right? Now I don't know Auburn's resume well enough. I just know that they're 1-7 in quad 1. Indiana State's now 1-4. I think they're 4-1 in quad 2, so they're 5-5 quad 1, quad 2. So I think that's good for Indiana State. That a team like Auburn, who's going to get a 5 seed, is 1-7. So they're going to be able to say, well, there isn't anyone else that's getting in that large bid that only has 1 quad 1 win. Now Auburn could pick up another 1 or 2 right there. Although I don't know if the SEC's got a bunch of those opportunities. If they get to the semis of the tournament, right? Once they get far enough, there's going to be another 1 or 2 quad 1 chances for them. But at most, they're going to be 2-7, maybe 3-7. But right now they have 1. So the Indian, it's also one part of the equation. It's the one that gets talked about the most because I think it's the one that you can look at it and see it, right? So it gets talked about the most, but it's one part of the equation, right? There's other parts to the equation of getting in that large bid, one of which is watching a team play. And I do know that the members of the committee watch a ton of basketball, right? They watch these teams play. And I don't want to insult anyone, but I'm not sure you should be on the basketball committee if you watch Indiana State play and don't think they should be in the NCAA tournament. And not just in our game, right? They played great in our game, but that's not the only time, right? You watch them play basketball, and that team should be in the NCAA tournament. So I think they cover that part of the equation, and their metrics are going to cover that part of the equation. And so there's not going to be a lot to point to say, oh no, they've got the loss at home to Illinois State. Kent got hurt 3 minutes into the second half. The loss at Southern Illinois, Jason Kent didn't play. So I think they've got most of those bases covered and believe that they should be in the NCAA tournament.
What do you feel it says about the overall health of men's college basketball that we're in a discussion where there's 2 teams that are clear as day and tournament teams, but we're having to debate if Indiana State would get in?
Yeah, I mean, the challenge. Yeah, the challenge goes back to the games that you can get in November and December. And maybe that's where you're going with your question, the state of college basketball, where the opportunities to get the quad 1, quad 2 games in November and December that's a real challenge. That's where the big challenge is. Now our league with Indiana State, so what you've got to do is figure out a way to get, because that part isn't going to change, Ethan. That's not changing. You've got to find them when you can. Right? You got to get them when you can. You got to see if you can't get a couple of them at home as a league. Right? You're not going to get a couple of them at home by an individual school. But can you get, so Indiana State's at 29. What's Drake at today? Are they in the 40s, high 40s?
They didn't move up at all.
They're 48, 49, let's call it, okay? Bradley is mid to high 50s, I think. I think they've cracked 60, or low 60s. We're at 100, we're at 110 maybe. Southern was running right around 100. Belmont got close to inside 125. So now, what you have to do is get 5 or 6 of our teams in the league. You've got to get them inside of 100. So now when you're playing each other, you have the quad 1 and quad 2 games. And like for us, we had enough of them this year. We had a great opportunity this year to get in that large bid. We had, I think we're 0-6 in quad 1, and we're 5 and 3. I'm guessing a little bit there. It's close. So we're 5 and 9 in quad 1, quad 2. Right? But if you start to talk about some of those games, right? Our team was good enough to win enough of those games that we could be in position to get in that large bid. Right? We didn't play good enough. Right? Our team was good enough, but we didn't play good enough. So we had a great schedule this year. Now, the one we had this year is a hard one to get every year. The Battle for Atlantis, you don't get that every year, right? Where you get 3 of those types of opportunities. So that remains the challenge. Okay, how do we get 5 or 6 teams inside 100 of the net, and at least 3 of them down around 50 or less? So when we play each other, right, that's where the Power 5 schools and that's where they rack up all the quad 1 and quad 2 games, is when they play each other. We made a huge jump from last year to this year, right? We're much better position this year than we were a year ago. And I think back to what we were talking about, Cole, when we started, we're 15 in the net last year as a league. This year we're 9th. Right. So that also is going to be a positive when we're talking Indiana State, right? So if we can hold tight around 9, next year, you'd love to bump down to 8. But you got to figure out a way to do that without, when we all know that we aren't going to get a bunch of quad 1 and quad 2 games in November, December. Okay, you just got to find the best ones you can, but you got to put your schedule together with your non-league games so that we can get 5 or 6 teams under 100. So when we're playing each other, then you can get your quad 1 and quad 2 stuff.
I'm curious because you're talking about how important scheduling is in November and December. You guys play 2 conference games in November and December. That's going to take about a week of your schedule of practice, preparation for those games. Yeah. Are those early conference games, are those hindering your ability to get better non-con games? No,
they're not. They're not hindering the opportunities that we would have. The league will work with all of our schools. If there's an opportunity to get the right game or games, the league will work with any of us to make sure that we can get those opportunities. No.
To go along with the scheduling of things, obviously every program's going to do what's best for themselves, and we all understand that. But have you discussed this as a league? What you were just touching on, making sure that you get those 5 teams in the top 100.
Yeah, we talk about it every spring. We talk about it, and it's there's the discussion is very similar every spring, right? We all understand where and why we need to get to there, right? We have some different thoughts as to how, right? When you talk about league, when you talk about presidents, talk about ADs, talk about coaches, we all know where we got to get, right? But there's some different thoughts, and then it takes money. It takes resources, right? And schools I know schools are working hard to increase the number of home buy games, like that's an important part of the numbers that we're talking about, is playing at home and winning games and doing it efficiently off your offensive and defensive efficiency. The best way to increase those things is to play at home in November and December. And that takes money to buy games. So, but that's part of the discussion that we have every year.
How much different is what you're doing this week, the next 30 days? How much different is that compared to 5-6 years ago now, the portal and particularly NIL and, like you've spoken before, the tampering that goes on?
Yeah, the world's apart from 5 years ago until last spring and now this spring. Yeah, they're not even in the same. Two completely different worlds. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time going into thoughts on how I feel about it, right? Because it's now it's now the world we live in. So, but
What's on your schedule?
worlds apart, right? Yeah. So just talking with the guys. We're spring break this week, so I'll talk with some of the guys, but most everybody has left town either today, yesterday, or even some guys were able to go with their families on Saturday. So a little bit different that way. Now, normally, if we weren't on spring break, I would meet with everybody today and have talk about where everybody's at, right? And get a handle on what they're thinking. Same thing I did last year, and that's a lot different than 5-6 years ago. So, yeah, I'll be doing that as much as I can this week while the guys are gone, and then I will see everybody on Monday and Tuesday of next week when they're back. But I'll be in touch with the guys a lot this week.
I'm curious if you could quantify on an AF or a 10-to-1 scale how you feel about the general health of your team this year throughout the entire season. Obviously, you didn't have any of your super major contributors or starters miss significant time, but you had Wes who missed the entire season. You had Hunter who missed the entire season. Just curious what you would grade the health at.
Yeah, if I'm understanding you right, Ethan, the availability of our guys, that part of I'm trying to think. I don't know that other than that stretch of mostly Drake Bradley, that week to 10 days where we had the sickness running through the team. It was really good. And to your point, like we didn't have, of the guys that played. So we'll go with the top 11 guys, right? The guys that would have played minutes in any way, shape, or form. They didn't miss much, right? Whether it be a full game or parts of games. So really, it was really good. Yeah. Other than that week to 10 days, right? And everybody goes through that part of it. But that was the one stretch where it was a little bit challenging. Anybody else? Good? All right, thank you.